Story number 1. Shadows at Desert Mirage Hotel. I've always been fascinated by the vast, uncharted expanses of the Nevada desert. The way the endless dunes meet the sky, the solitude that blankets the land. It calls to a part of me that craves isolation and reflection. So, when I decided to embark on a solo road trip across Nevada, I was eager to explore its hidden gems and forgotten places. Little did I know, my journey would lead me to a nightmarish encounter that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. It was late September, and the weather was unusually unpredictable. My itinerary was simple: drive from Las Vegas to Reno, stopping at various landmarks along the way. After days of smooth sailing, I found myself navigating through a particularly desolate stretch of the desert as the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and crimson. The road ahead was winding, flanked by rugged mountains and sparse vegetation that seemed to whisper secrets in the cooling breeze. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and an eerie stillness settled over the landscape. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the deserted highway that stretched infinitely in both directions. It was then that I spotted it, a small, isolated building standing defiantly against the encroaching night. The sign above read Desert Mirage Hotel, its letters barely visible under layers of dust and neglect. Curious and exhausted, I decided to investigate, hoping to find some semblance of shelter before the storm that the weather forecast had ominously predicted. The approach was unsettling. The hotel's facade was weathered, windows darkened by grime, and the once grand entrance now appeared dilapidated and unwelcoming. Yet, there was something strangely inviting about it, a silent plea for attention amidst the barren desert. I parked my truck a safe distance away, the engine's hum the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. Gathering my courage, I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the entrance. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a dimly lit lobby that seemed frozen in time. The air was thick with the scent of stale air and decaying wood, a stark contrast to the crisp desert night outside. The lobby was sparsely furnished, with a lone reception desk and a grand chandelier hanging precariously from the ceiling. I approached the desk, the echo of my footsteps resonating through the empty space. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the vast, silent room. No response. The receptionist was nowhere to be seen. Shaking off the unease, I turned to the back of the lobby, where a staircase led to the upper floors. Deciding to make myself comfortable, I walked towards what appeared to be the main lounge area, the floorboards creaking under my weight. As I settled into a dusty armchair, the storm outside began to intensify. The wind howled through the cracks in the windows, and snowflakes danced violently in the darkness. The power seemed to flicker sporadically, plunging the room into brief moments of darkness before the lights sputtered back to life. I pulled out my phone, hoping to contact a friend or access maps, but the signal was non-existent. My GPS had lost its connection, leaving me stranded in this forsaken place. Hours passed in uneasy silence until a sudden noise shattered the stillness. A soft, rhythmic knocking at the front door. My heart raced as I froze, listening intently. The knocking continued, persistent and deliberate, echoing through the hollow halls of the hotel. Summoning my courage, I grabbed my flashlight and approached the door, the beam cutting through the darkness. I opened the door to find nothing but the swirling snow and the empty parking lot. The storm seemed to laugh at me, the wind howling louder as if mocking my futile search for answers. Puzzled and unnerved, I stepped outside, scanning the desolate landscape for any sign of movement. The footprints in the snow were the only evidence of something or someone having been there, but they led nowhere, disappearing into the endless white. Returning to the lobby, I tried to dismiss the experience as a trick of the storm, a product of my exhausted mind. But as the night deepened, so did the strange occurrences. The lights began to flicker more erratically, casting unsettling shadows that danced across the walls. I heard faint whispers, indistinct voices that seemed to originate from the very walls of the hotel. Every time I turned to locate the source, nothing was there. Determined to find some semblance of normalcy, I decided to explore the upper floors, hoping to uncover any clues about the hotel's current state. The staircase creaked ominously as I ascended, each step amplifying the tension in the air. Reaching the top, I found a long corridor lined with closed doors, each one seemingly untouched for years. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, guiding me towards one particular door at the far end. As I approached, the temperature in the corridor dropped sharply, my breath visible in the frigid air. The door was slightly ajar, and a flickering light emanated from within. Pushing the door open, I entered what appeared to be a guest room, the furnishings covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. A grand piano stood in the corner, its keys yellowed and silent, yet a faint melody began to play, the notes dissonant and haunting. Frozen in fear, I watched as an apparition materialized before me, a figure of a man, his face contorted in agony, his eyes hollow and lifeless. He reached out towards me, his hand passing through my shoulder like a chill wind. "Leave, before it's too late," he whispered, his voice echoing with sorrow and desperation. Terrified, I stumbled back, the room spinning as the apparition dissolved into thin air. The melody from the piano grew louder, the notes now filled with a palpable sense of grief. I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, the sound deafening in the confined space. Desperation set in as I pounded against the door, the whispers now a cacophony of anguished cries and pleading voices. Just as panic threatened to consume me, the room fell silent. The piano ceased its mournful tune, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive stillness, summoning every ounce of strength. I forced the door open and fled down the corridor, the haunting voices fading behind me. I raced back to the lobby, the storm outside intensifying as if the hotel itself was fighting to keep me trapped. Exhausted and terrified, I collapsed into the armchair, my mind reeling from the night's events. The first light of dawn began to break, the storm finally subsiding and revealing the stark beauty of the Nevada desert. As the sun rose, I made my way to the front desk, hoping to find answers or at least some semblance of acknowledgement of my stay. But when I returned, the desk was empty, the register untouched. I approached the receptionist's chair, but it was gone, replaced by an empty space that seemed to absorb the morning light. Bewildered, I exited the hotel, my eyes scanning the desolate landscape for any signs of life. The footprints from the night were still present, leading deep into the forest, but they vanished without a trace. Determined to uncover the truth, I sought out a nearby town, where I hoped to find someone who could shed light on the mysterious Desert Mirage Hotel. I visited the local library, poring over old records and newspaper clippings. It wasn't long before I discovered the horrifying history of the hotel, a brutal mass murder that had occurred a decade earlier. The victims had been a family of 4, their lives snuffed out in a single, bloody night, the perpetrator never found. The hotel had been closed immediately after, its reputation forever tarnished by the tragedy. The realization hit me hard. The spirits I'd encountered were the restless souls of the victims, trapped in an endless loop of their final moments, unable to move on from the terror that had claimed their lives. The man in the guest room was the father, his anguish a testament to the pain and suffering that had bound him to the hotel. Determined to help, I returned to the Desert Mirage Hotel with a renewed sense of purpose. Armed with candles, photographs, and a deep respect for the lost souls, I prepared to perform a ritual of remembrance, hoping to bring peace to their tormented spirits. As night fell once more, I entered the lobby, the air thick with anticipation and sorrow. I lit the candles around the room, placing family photos and personal mementos on the mantelpiece, speaking words of remembrance and forgiveness. As I chanted the names of the victims, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift, the heavy silence giving way to a gentle stillness that spoke of acceptance and release. The grand piano began to play once more, But this time, the melody was soothing and filled with a sense of hope. The apparition of the man appeared before me, his expression now one of gratitude and peace. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice no longer filled with despair but with relief. The spirits of the family joined him, their forms now serene and free from the torment that had held them captive for so long. With a final, collective sigh, the apparitions faded into the light, leaving behind a tranquil silence that enveloped the hotel. The storm had passed, the sun casting a warm glow through the windows, illuminating the once haunted halls with a newfound sense of peace. As I left the Desert Mirage Hotel, the memories of that transformative night etched themselves into my soul. The encounter had taught me the enduring power of compassion and the importance of honoring those who can no longer speak for themselves. The hotel, once a place of tragedy and sorrow, now stood as a sanctuary of remembrance and healing. Years have passed since that pivotal night, and the Desert Mirage Hotel remains a symbol of hope and redemption amidst the desolate Nevada desert. The stories of the haunted hotel have become a part of local folklore, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the pines and the snow blankets the land in silence, I catch a glimpse of a faint light or hear the distant echo of a family's laughter, a silent testament to the bonds that connect us all and the healing that comes from remembering and honoring the stories of those who have been lost. Living with the memory of that night, I understand that some places hold secrets too powerful to be forgotten, their echoes lingering in the winds and whispers of the mountains. By facing the darkness with empathy and respect, we can bridge the gap between our world and the spirits that linger in the shadows, offering them the peace they seek and ensuring that their tales are never forgotten. And sometimes, as I drive through the quiet Nevada desert, the vast expanse of snow-covered landscape stretching out before me, I feel a profound connection to the spirits of the past, a reminder that compassion and understanding can transform even the most haunted places into havens of peace and remembrance. Story number 2. Whispers on Shadow Isle. I've always been drawn to the solitude that only the open sea and secluded shores can offer. As a fisherman, my life revolves around the rhythm of the tides and the whispers of the ocean. So when my old boat, the Seafarer, sprung a leak during a particularly harsh autumn storm, I knew I had to find a safe haven to make repairs. Shadow Isle, a small, uncharted island off the coast of Maine, seemed like the perfect refuge. Its rocky shores and dense pine forests promised both shelter and isolation. The journey to Shadow Isle was treacherous, especially as the storm raged on. Waves crashed against the hull, and the wind howled like a chorus of lost souls. By the time I spotted the island's silhouette against the tumultuous sea, exhaustion and desperation had taken hold. Navigating through the rough waters, I finally anchored the Seafarer in a sheltered cove, the storm's fury gradually subsiding as I made my way ashore. The island was eerily quiet, the only sounds the distant crashing of waves and the rustling of pine needles underfoot. As I set to work on repairing the boat, the fading light of dusk cast long shadows across the rocky terrain. The cabin I discovered nestled among the trees seemed abandoned, its windows dark and boarded up. Yet, there was something unsettling about its presence, an unspoken warning that kept me wary. By the time night fell, the island was enveloped in darkness, the storm's remnants swirling into a restless wind. I managed to patch the leak, but the fatigue was overwhelming. Seeking warmth, I settled into the cabin, lighting a fire in the stone fireplace. The flickering flames provided a semblance of comfort, but an inexplicable sense of unease lingered in the air. As midnight approached, the silence was broken by a faint, distant voice calling my name. At first, I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on my tired mind, but the calls persisted, growing louder and more insistent, echoing through the stillness of the island. "Jack! Jack!" the voice whispered, carrying a tone of sorrow and desperation. My heart pounded as I strained to listen, the realization dawning on me that I wasn't alone. Gathering my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside, the cold night air biting at my skin. The beam of light pierced the darkness, revealing the desolate shoreline bathed in the pale moonlight. There, standing at the edge of the water, was the silhouette of a man. His posture was hunched, as if weighed down by an invisible burden. I approached cautiously, every step crunching on the icy sand. As I drew nearer, the figure seemed to dissolve into the mist, leaving behind only a series of footprints that trailed into the churning sea. Confusion and fear gripped me as I followed the footprints, their path leading into the darkened forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching out to trap me. The voice echoed again, stronger this time. "Help me, Jack!" Panic surged through me, my breath visible in the frigid air. I stumbled through the underbrush, the footprints fading into the dense foliage until they vanished altogether. The forest was alive with unsettling sounds, the creaking of trees, the distant howl of a lone wolf, and the persistent whisper of the wind that now seemed to carry anguished cries. Just as I began to lose hope, I stumbled upon a clearing bathed in an unnatural light. In the center stood an unmarked grave, the ground freshly disturbed despite the season. My hands trembled as I approached, the air growing colder with each step. The whispers intensified, surrounding me with voices of the lost and the damned. "Don't stay, don't stay." The voices chorused, their pleas echoing through the night. Overwhelmed by fear, I turned to flee, but the path back was obscured by an impenetrable fog that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. The whispers followed, growing louder, their sorrowful tones turning into cries of anguish and despair. Desperate, I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cold stone of the grave, the ground beneath me trembling as if reacting to my touch. In that moment, the full weight of the island's tragic history crashed down upon me. Years ago, a family had been lost to the unforgiving storm, their spirits trapped on Shadow Isle, unable to find peace. The man I saw on the beach was the father, forever searching for his missing children, his cries a desperate plea for salvation. Tears streamed down my face as I knelt beside the grave, my heart aching with empathy for the tormented souls around me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I didn't mean to intrude. Let me help you." The air shifted, the oppressive cold lifting slightly as a sense of calm washed over the clearing. The whispers softened, their cries fading into a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves above. The footprints reappeared, leading away from the grave and back towards the beach, guiding me back to the path that would lead me home. With a heavy heart, I made my way back to the cabin, the first light of dawn breaking through the horizon. The storm had passed, leaving the island in a serene silence that belied its haunted past. As I boarded the seafarer, I glanced back at the island, a silent promise of respect and remembrance etched in my mind. Driving away from Shadow Isle, the memories of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the fragile boundary between the living and the dead. The encounter had left an indelible mark on my soul, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and the importance of honoring those who can no longer speak for themselves. Years have passed since that transformative winter on Shadow Isle, and the memory of the lost family remains a poignant chapter in my life story. The island, once a place of tragedy and sorrow, now stands as a symbol of the enduring bonds that connect us all, transcending even the most unforgiving storms. Whenever I drive along the rugged shores of Maine, the vast expanse of snow-covered landscape stretching out before me, I carry with me the lessons learned from that night. The open road, once a symbol of freedom and solitude, now holds a deeper meaning, a connection to the spirits of the past and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for redemption and peace. And sometimes, when the wind whispers through the pines and the snow blankets the land in silence, I catch a glimpse of a faint shadow or hear the distant echo of a sorrowful plea, a silent testament to the souls we helped to set free and the bonds that connect us all, transcending even the most relentless winters. Story number 3. echoes of the forgotten mine. I've always been fascinated by the hidden histories that lie beneath the surface of our modern world. As a freelance photographer and amateur historian, the lure of uncovering forgotten places and the stories they hold is irresistible. So when a group of friends and I planned a winter expedition into the remote mountains of Colorado, little did we know we were about to stumble upon a nightmare from the past. It was early December, and the forecast promised a heavy snowstorm, a perfect excuse for a weekend getaway away from the hustle and bustle of city life. We arrived at the base of the Rockies, our gear packed into sturdy SUVs, the air crisp with the scent of pine and snow. The trail we intended to follow was seldom used, a forgotten path that led deep into the heart of the wilderness. The first day was everything we hoped for. We hiked through pristine snow-covered forests, the silence broken only by the crunch of our boots and the distant call of a lone eagle. By late afternoon, we reached the old mining camp, a cluster of dilapidated wooden cabins nestled between towering pines. The buildings were weathered by years of neglect, their windows shattered, and doors hanging askew. It was as if time itself had abandoned this place, leaving behind only remnants of a once thriving community. We set up camp in the largest cabin, its walls adorned with faded photographs and rusty mining tools scattered across the floor. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the snow began to fall in thick, relentless sheets. We huddled around a makeshift fire, sharing stories and enjoying the warmth, oblivious to the darkness that awaited us. Around midnight, the storm intensified, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. That's when we heard it, the unmistakable sound of digging, echoing through the hollow cabins. At first, we dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on our ears, but the noise grew louder and more insistent, a rhythmic pounding that seemed to come from adjacent rooms. "Did you guys hear that?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake, always the skeptic, tried to rationalize it. Probably just the wind or some animal trying to get in. These old cabins aren't exactly secure. But Sarah, our group's de facto leader, felt a chill run down her spine. No, it sounds different, more deliberate, like someone, or something, is trying to dig their way out. We exchanged uneasy glances, the sense of unease growing with each passing moment. The digging stopped as abruptly as it had started, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against our ears. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, followed by the sound of footsteps pounding through the cabin. Panic set in as we realized we were not alone. "Stay calm," Jake urged, though his voice betrayed his fear. "We need to figure out where it's coming from." Armed with flashlights, we cautiously moved through the cabin, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The screams and footsteps continued, guiding us towards a narrow hallway leading to what appeared to be a storage room. As we approached, the sounds grew louder, more desperate. Inside the room, we found nothing but old mining equipment and a thick layer of dust. My flashlight flickered, casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. That's when I noticed the faint outline of a trapdoor beneath a pile of debris in the corner. "Look at this," I called out, my voice shaky as I knelt to inspect the trapdoor. It was partially concealed by broken tools and old newspapers, their headlines long since faded by time. Jake and Sarah helped me clear the debris, revealing a sturdy metal latch. With a collective breath, we pulled it open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase spiraling downward into the unknown. The air grew colder as we descended, the temperature dropping noticeably with each step. The digging noises had stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence that seemed to press down on us. At the bottom of the stairs, we entered a vast underground chamber, the remnants of a secret mine operation. The walls were lined with old wooden beams, and the floor was slick with ice and snow that had somehow made its way underground. In the center of the chamber stood an old, rusty mine cart, its wheels frozen in place. As we explored further, the truth of the cabin's dark history began to unravel. According to local legend, The mining camp had been the site of a brutal massacre in the 1870s. A group of miners, driven mad by isolation and despair, had turned on each other, their screams echoing through the mountains. The bodies had never been recovered, their spirits believed to haunt the very place where they had met their gruesome end. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with a cold, oppressive presence. The temperature plummeted further, our breaths freezing in mid-air. The digging noises resumed, louder and more frantic than before, accompanied by the sound of anguished cries that echoed off the stone walls. "We need to leave. Now!" Sarah shouted, her face pale with fear. "Something's not right here." But as we turned to leave, the entrance to the chamber had vanished, replaced by solid stone walls. Panic surged through me as the realization set in: we were trapped, caught in the spectral grip of the miners' restless souls. The digging noises morphed into the sound of pickaxes striking rock, the anguished screams growing louder, more desperate. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, ghostly apparitions of miners in tattered clothing, their eyes hollow with eternal sorrow. The spirits moved towards us, their presence suffocating, their pain palpable. "We have to help them," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of sounds. "They're trapped, unable to move on, desperate to find a way out." We searched the chamber for any clue that could release the spirits and free ourselves from their torment. In a forgotten corner, we discovered an old ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. The final entry detailed the miners' descent into madness, their futile attempts to survive the relentless storm, and their eventual downfall. Understanding dawned on me: we needed to honor their memory, acknowledge their suffering, and help them find peace. We gathered the remaining candles and started a makeshift memorial, lighting each one with reverence and speaking words of remembrance and forgiveness. As we performed the ritual, the atmosphere in the chamber began to change. The oppressive cold lifted slightly, the anguished cries softening into whispers of gratitude. The ghostly apparitions paused, their expressions shifting from sorrow to relief as the candle's warm glow enveloped them. One by one, the spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. The digging noises ceased, replaced by a gentle stillness that spoke of peace finally attained. The entrance to the chamber reappeared, the stone walls giving way to reveal the narrow staircase leading back to the surface. Exhausted but relieved, we climbed the stairs and emerged into the storm's aftermath. The snow had stopped, leaving a pristine blanket of white over the cabin and the surrounding forest. The house, once a place of horror, now stood silent and still, the dark history of the past finally laid to rest. In the days that followed, we shared our story with locals and fellow hikers, the tale of the haunted cabin and the restless spirits of the miners becoming a new chapter in the area's folklore. The cabin remained abandoned, a solemn reminder of the lives lost and the power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. Years later, the memory of that winter night in Montana still lingers in my mind, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. The experience taught me that some places hold secrets too heavy to bear alone, their stories demanding to be told and honored. It's a testament to the enduring power of empathy and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for redemption and peace. Whenever I find myself trekking through the snowy trails of Montana, the echoes of that night resonate within me, a silent tribute to the spirits we helped to set free and the bonds that connect us all, transcending even the most unforgiving winters. Story number 4. No exit road. I've always found solace in the hum of my truck's engine and the endless expanse of the Texas highways stretching out before me. The open road is where I feel most alive. Miles of asphalt winding through vast landscapes that change with every sunrise and sunset. But that night, amidst the bitter chill of an unexpected Texas winter storm, the road became a path to a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. It was late October, and I was hauling supplies from Dallas to Amarillo, a route I'd driven countless times without incident. The weather had been unusually unpredictable this year, with sudden snowstorms sweeping through the usually mild plains. I checked the forecast multiple times, each update promising clear skies ahead. Confident in my ability to navigate, I pressed on, unaware that the storm was plotting a sinister course for me. By midnight, the sky had darkened to an almost impenetrable black, the snow swirling violently around my windshield. Visibility was reduced to mere feet, and the wind howled like a pack of wolves, threatening to tear my truck apart. I slowed down, the treacherous conditions making every mile a battle against nature's fury. My GPS had been reliable up until now, guiding me smoothly through the night, but as the storm intensified, it began to falter, the satellite signals lost in the blinding blizzard. Panic started to set in as the hours dragged on, and the road seemed to stretch into infinity. My maps were outdated. The small towns and landmarks I once relied on now swallowed by the relentless snowfall. I was miles away from any sign of civilization, trapped in a frozen purgatory with no way out. Exhausted and desperate, I made the split-second decision to stop at the first sign of shelter, a small, isolated house that appeared through the whiteout like a beacon of hope. The house stood alone in a clearing, its wooden frame weathered by years of harsh winters. The windows were frosted over, but a single porch light flickered weakly, offering a semblance of warmth amidst the cold darkness. With trembling hands, I pulled over and stepped out into the biting wind, my breath visible in the frigid air. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing an empty interior that seemed frozen in time. Inside, the air was cold and still, the silence broken only by the distant howl of the storm. I wandered through the sparsely furnished rooms, the dim light casting long shadows that danced eerily on the walls. My heart raced as I tried to rationalize the situation. Perhaps the house was abandoned, a relic left behind by someone who had long since moved on. But as I moved deeper into the house, an overwhelming sense of unease settled over me. In the living room, an old, ornate mirror hung above the fireplace, its glass clouded with age. Drawn to it, I approached cautiously, wiping away the frost to reveal my own reflection. That's when I noticed it, a faded photograph hanging on the mantel. My blood ran cold as I realized the image depicted me, smiling and carefree, surrounded by friends I didn't recognize. Confusion turned to horror as I tried to remember ever being there. But my memory offered no explanation. A chill wind swept through the room, and the door slammed shut with a force that made me jump. My flashlight flickered, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. I spun around, searching for the source of the disturbance. But the room remained empty. My mind raced, struggling to make sense of the impossible sighting. Was I losing my grip on reality? Or was something far more sinister at play? Determined to leave, I rushed towards the door, only to find it locked from the inside. Panic surged through me as I banged against the wood, shouting for help into the void. The storm outside intensified, the wind lashing against the windows like the fury of unseen spirits. Desperate, I turned back to the living room, where the photograph had hung, now covered in frost like the rest of the house. As I stared at the image, the air grew colder, my breath turning to ice in my lungs. The reflection in the mirror began to distort, my features twisting into a grotesque parody of my own visage. My eyes, wide with fear, seemed to stare back at me from within the glass, their once familiar gaze now empty and hollow. I reached out to touch the mirror, my fingers passing through the cold surface as if it were made of mist. A voice echoed through the house, low and mournful. "Don't stay," it whispered, the words carrying a weight of sorrow and despair. I recoiled, stumbling back as the room seemed to close in around me. The photograph in the mantel began to move, the smiling faces contorting into expressions of anguish and terror. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I wasn't alone. Something malevolent haunted this place, tethered to me in a way I couldn't comprehend. In a frantic attempt to escape, I searched for another exit, finding none. The house seemed to morph corridors stretching and twisting in impossible ways, trapping me within its cold embrace. The footsteps I had heard earlier resumed, louder and more insistent, pacing back and forth with an eerie purpose. The whispers grew into anguished cries, the voices of lost souls trapped within these walls. Desperate, I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face as I begged for mercy. "Please, let me go," pleaded, my voice cracking with emotion. The storm outside began to abate, the howling wind giving way to a haunting silence that enveloped the house. The oppressive cold lifted slightly, replaced by an overwhelming sense of sadness that weighed heavily on my soul. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the storm's remnants, casting a warm glow on the frosted windows. The house stood silent and still, the spirits that had tormented me now seemingly at peace. The door unlocked itself with a gentle push, inviting me to leave the nightmare behind. Without hesitation, I grabbed my things and fled into the morning light, the memory of that night etched into my mind forever. Driving away from the haunted cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, the eyes from the photograph still lingering in my mind. When I reached the next town, I tried to find the road I had taken, but to my dismay, there was no record of it on any map. The route seemed to have vanished, as if erased by the very storm that had trapped me. Local residents were tight-lipped, their eyes avoiding mine when I inquired about the mysterious house and the road that didn't exist. Over the years, I've heard similar stories from other drivers who found themselves lost in the Texas wilderness, encountering inexplicable phenomena that defy logic. The tales speak of a cursed road, a place where the past and present collide, trapping those who venture too far into its depths. It's a chilling reminder that some roads lead to places better left unexplored, where the echoes of the past linger like ghosts in the night. The experience at that cabin taught me that the open road holds more secrets than one can imagine. Stories of tragedy and sorrow that remain hidden beneath the surface. It's a testament to the enduring power of memory and the lingering presence of those who have been lost to time. Whenever I drive through the vast expanses of Texas, I can't help but feel a shiver run down my spine, the whisper of a forgotten voice reminding me of the night I faced the supernatural on a road that no longer exists. Living with the memory of that night, I've come to understand that some places carry the weight of history so profoundly that the past refuses to stay buried. By respecting and honoring the stories of those who came before us, we can bridge the gap between our world and the spirits that linger in the shadows, offering them the peace they seek and ensuring that their tales are never forgotten. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the Texas pines and the snow blankets the land in silence, I catch a glimpse of a faint red coat or hear the distant echo of a sorrowful plea, a silent testament to the bonds that connect us all and the enduring hope for redemption and peace, even on the most desolate roads. Story number 5. Whispers at the Montana Cabin. I've always been drawn to the serenity that only the wilderness can offer. So when my friends Jake, Emma, Sarah, and I decided to rent a secluded cabin in the heart of Montana's dense forests for a weekend getaway, I welcomed the idea with open arms. After months of relentless work and city noise, the promise of untouched nature and peaceful nights under a blanket of stars was exactly what we needed. The cabin stood alone amidst towering pines, its rustic wooden exterior blending seamlessly with the surrounding forest. From the moment we arrived, the isolation was palpable. The nearest town was miles away, accessible only by winding roads that disappeared into the thickening woods. Inside, the cabin exuded a cozy warmth, with a large stone fireplace dominating the living room and antique furnishings that added to its old-world charm. Our first day was blissfully uneventful. We spent hours hiking through snow-laden trails, marveling at frozen waterfalls and the pristine beauty of the winter landscape. As dusk settled, we gathered around the fireplace, sharing stories and sipping hot cocoa, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Nightfall brought with it a deep, enveloping silence that was both comforting and unnerving. Around midnight, as we were settling into our beds. An unexpected storm began to brew outside. The wind howled through the trees, and snowflakes whipped against the windows, reducing visibility to mere feet. The cabin groaned under the weight of the storm, but we felt safe inside, insulated from the fury outside. Just past midnight, a strange sound pierced the silence, a series of soft, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth on the wooden floorboards. At first, we dismissed it as the cabin settling or the storm playing tricks on our ears. But the sound persisted, growing louder and more insistent, as if someone was walking in a steady, rhythmic pattern around the cabin. Jake, always the skeptic, suggested it might be an animal seeking shelter. But Emma, with her keen sense of the supernatural, felt a chill run down her spine. "Guys, did you hear that? It doesn't sound like any animal I know." We exchanged uneasy glances, trying to rationalize the noise. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped, replaced by a faint, sorrowful laugh that echoed through the empty rooms. My heart raced as I felt an inexplicable sense of being watched. The oppressive silence now broken by the haunting laughter. Unable to contain our curiosity and fear, we decided to investigate. Grabbing our flashlights, we cautiously moved through the cabin, the beams of light cutting through the darkness. The living room was empty, the fireplace cold and still, yet the atmosphere felt charged with an unseen presence. As we reached the kitchen, we noticed something that sent shivers down our spines. Bare footprints leading from the back door into the heavy snowfall outside. The prints were large, human, and unmistakably fresh. Yet the storm had been raging for hours, making it impossible for anyone to have ventured out and returned unnoticed. Sarah, the most practical of us, voiced what we were all thinking. "We need to leave. Now." But before we could react, the door to the kitchen slammed shut, the force of it shaking the entire cabin. Panic set in as the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and move with a life of their own. The room grew colder, our breaths visible in the frigid air as the storm outside intensified. Desperate to escape, we rushed towards the front door, only to find it locked from the outside. The footsteps and laughter returned, louder and more frantic, echoing through the halls as if the spirits of the past were trying to communicate with us. Emma pointed to an old family portrait hanging on the wall, a group of smiling faces that seemed almost too lifelike, their eyes following us with an unsettling intensity. "We need to understand what's happening," Jake said, his skepticism wavering in the face of the inexplicable events. Determined to uncover the truth, we decided to search the cabin for any clues. In the attic, we found old journals and newspaper clippings detailing a series of gruesome murders that had occurred in the 1970s. The cabin had once belonged to the Thompson family, a mother, father, and their 2 young children, who had been brutally murdered by an unknown assailant during a similar winter storm. The case had gone cold, the family never found, their spirits believed to haunt the very place we were staying. As we delved deeper into the history, the atmosphere in the cabin grew heavier, the presence of the restless spirits becoming more palpable. The footsteps now seemed to move with purpose, leading us to a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards where we discovered remnants of the Thompson family's final moments: broken toys, torn clothing, and a faded photograph of the family smiling together. The discovery only heightened the tension, the spirit's anguish now evident in the oppressive cold and the lingering sorrow that filled the cabin. We realized that the spirits were trapped in an endless loop of their tragic demise, unable to move on until their story was told and their memories honored. Determined to help, we decided to perform a ritual of remembrance, hoping to bring peace to the restless souls. We gathered around the fireplace, lighting candles and speaking words of forgiveness and remembrance, acknowledging the pain and loss that had bound the Thompson family to the cabin. As we spoke, the temperature seemed to rise, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if the spirits were finally finding solace. Just as we began to feel a sense of calm, the final act of the ritual took place, the chanting of the family's names. ensuring that their story would never be forgotten. The air shimmered with an ethereal light, the spirits of the Thompson family appearing before us, their forms now serene and peaceful, their eyes, once filled with fear and sorrow, now reflected gratitude and relief. "Thank you," the father's voice echoed softly, his eyes meeting ours with a profound sense of peace. "You've set us free." With those final words, the spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the warm glow of the candles as the last remnants of their anguish lifted from the cabin. The storm outside subsided, the wind quieting to a gentle whisper as dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden light through the windows. Exhausted but relieved, we sat together in the now peaceful cabin, the memories of the night etched into our hearts forever. The haunting presence that had once tormented us was gone, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and a deeper understanding of the power of compassion and empathy. In the days that followed, life returned to normal, the cabin a place of serenity and warmth rather than fear and sorrow. We shared our story with the locals, ensuring that the tragic tale of the Thompson family would never be forgotten, their spirits finally at peace. Years have passed since that transformative winter in Montana, and the memory of our encounter remains a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. The whispers and footsteps that once echoed through the cabin are now nothing but echoes of the past, a testament to the enduring power of kindness and the importance of honoring those who can no longer speak for themselves. Whenever I drive through the snow-covered roads of Montana, the vast wilderness stretching out before me, I carry with me the lessons learned from that night. The open road, once a symbol of freedom and solitude, now holds a deeper meaning, a connection to the spirits of the past and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for redemption and peace. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the pines and the snow blankets the land in silence, I catch a glimpse of a faint, ethereal figure or hear the distant echo of a child's laughter, a silent testament to the bonds that connect us all and the healing that comes from remembering and honoring the stories of those who have been lost. Story number 6. Whispers on the Alaskan Road. The open road has always been my sanctuary, a place where the relentless pace of life slows to the rhythm of my heartbeat and the hum of my engine. As a long-haul trucker, I've spent countless nights under the vast expanse of the Alaskan sky, where the stars burn brighter and the silence is both comforting and eerie. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I encountered the ghostly woman on that desolate Alaskan road, a night that would haunt my dreams and shatter my perception of reality. It was late November, a time when the winter chill begins to bite with unforgiving intensity. I had been driving for over 12 hours, hauling supplies to a remote mining outpost nestled deep within the snow-covered wilderness. The route was familiar, a well-worn path through towering pines and endless white expanses. But that night, something felt different. The sky was an oppressive shade of gray, heavy with the promise of an impending storm. As I approached mile marker 247, the first flurries of snow began to fall, light at first but quickly gaining momentum. The wind picked up, howling through the gaps in my truck's windows, making it difficult to concentrate on the road ahead. Visibility dropped rapidly, the windshield obscured by a relentless barrage of snowflakes. I knew I needed to find shelter before the storm fully unleashed its fury. Spotting a small, isolated gas station up ahead, I decided to pull over. Any semblance of refuge was better than battling the storm alone out here. The gas station was a relic from a bygone era, its neon sign flickering intermittently against the darkening sky. The building looked abandoned, windows boarded up years ago, but the presence of a single light suggested that someone, or something, was still inside. I maneuvered my truck onto the gravel parking lot, the tires crunching against the deepening snow, steeling myself against the cold. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the entrance. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old oil and stale coffee. Tables were set up in a sparse cafeteria area, their surfaces covered in a thin layer of dust. I approached the counter, hoping to find someone who could offer assistance or at least a place to wait out the storm. But the counter was empty, the cash register long since abandoned. Unease settled over me as I scanned the room, the silence broken only by the distant sound of the storm raging outside. Deciding to make myself comfortable, I sat down at one of the tables, pulling my coat tighter around me. Minutes passed in uneasy silence until I felt an inexplicable urge to use the restroom. The restroom was located at the far end of the station, a narrow corridor lined with old, faded posters and broken fixtures. I left my truck running and stepped into the frigid night, the door swinging shut behind me with a force that seemed almost intentional. Inside the restroom, the air was even colder, my breath visible in the dim light. I locked the door behind me, leaning against the sink as I tried to steady my nerves. That's when I heard it, a soft, sorrowful whisper carried by the howling wind outside. It was barely audible, but unmistakably human. "Don't stay." The voice seemed to sigh, the words echoing off the tiled walls. I froze, my heart racing as I scanned the room for any sign of movement. There was no one there, just the reflection of my own terrified expression in the mirror. Shaking off the unease, I finished my business and hurried back to my truck, eager to leave the unsettling restroom behind. As I reached for the door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A message scrawled across the glass, written in what looked like blood-red frost. "Don't stay." My mind raced, trying to rationalize the impossible. The gas station had been abandoned for years, yet here was a message unmistakably written by human hands. Panic surged through me as I glanced around the empty station, the oppressive silence amplifying my fear. I grabbed my flashlight and ran back to the counter, frantically searching for any clues or signs of life, but found nothing. Just as I was about to abandon the search, a chill wind swept through the building, extinguishing the lone bulb overhead and plunging me into darkness. The temperature dropped further, my breath quickening as the air grew thick with an unseen presence. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the very walls of the gas station were closing in on me. A soft, plaintive melody began to play, emanating from the back of the station. It was the unmistakable sound of a piano, its notes echoing through the empty halls with a haunting resonance. The music was sorrowful, filled with a longing that tugged at my soul. Compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity, I followed the sound, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The music led me to a small storage room, its door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I was greeted by the sight of an old, dusty piano in the corner, its keys yellowed with age. The room was empty, save for the piano, yet the music continued, as if an invisible hand were playing it in my presence. I approached the instrument, my heart pounding, and reached out to touch the keys. As my fingers made contact, the music stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence that seemed to press against my ears. Suddenly, a figure materialized before me, a woman in a flowing white dress, her face pale and devoid of eyes. She stood motionless, her presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. My mind screamed to look away, but I was rooted to the spot, unable to move as she raised her hand in a silent plea. "Please, don't stay," she mouthed, her lips moving without sound. I wanted to flee, to escape the nightmare unfolding before me, but my legs wouldn't obey. The woman began to move towards me, her steps slow and deliberate, leaving no trace on the cold, hard floor. As she drew closer, the air grew colder, the oppressive chill seeping into my bones. "Leave now," she whispered, her voice a mere breath against the roaring storm outside. Summoning every ounce of courage, I turned and fled the room, racing back through the empty halls to the counter. The building seemed to come alive, the walls shifting and closing in as the storm outside raged on with renewed fury. I grabbed my flashlight and sprinted towards the door, only to find it locked from the outside. No matter how hard I pushed or pulled, desperation set in as the whispers returned. louder and more insistent. "Don't stay," they echoed, the voices overlapping in a cacophony of sorrow and fear. The temperature continued to drop, my breath frosting in the frigid air as the spirits of the past sought to keep me trapped within their haunted sanctuary. Just as panic threatened to consume me, the storm began to abate, the howling wind dying down to a mournful whisper. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a serene stillness that enveloped the gas station. The door unlocked itself, swinging open to reveal the clearing night. The storm now a distant memory. I didn't hesitate, throwing open the door. I sped away from the haunted gas station, the image of the pale, eyeless woman etched into my mind forever. The next morning, I reached the nearest town, my nerves still frayed from the ordeal. Desperate for answers, I visited the local library, poring over old records and newspaper clippings. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon a tragic story that mirrored my own experience. 30 years prior, in December 1953, a family of 4 had been traveling through the same stretch of Alaskan road when a sudden blizzard trapped them in an isolated gas station. Despite their efforts to survive, the storm was relentless, and the family succumbed to the freezing temperatures. Their car was never found, and the gas station was abandoned shortly after, the tragedy leaving a lingering presence that locals whispered about in hushed tones. Determined to bring peace to the restless spirits, I returned to the gas station with a renewed sense of purpose. Armed with candles, photographs, and a deep respect for the lost souls, I prepared to honor their memory and lay their spirits to rest. I lit the candles around the piano, placed family photos on the counter, and spoke words of remembrance and forgiveness, acknowledging the pain and despair that had bound their spirits to the haunted gas station. As the final candle flickered, the air grew warmer, the oppressive cold lifting as if the spirits were finally finding the closure they had long been denied. The woman in white appeared once more, her expression now one of gratitude and peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine relief before she faded into the light, leaving behind a tranquil stillness that spoke of newfound serenity. Driving away from the gas station, the morning sun breaking through the lingering clouds, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. The haunted whispers and the ghostly apparitions were gone, replaced by the comforting sounds of nature awakening to a new day. The memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the enduring power of compassion and understanding. Years have passed since that transformative winter in Alaska, and the haunted gas station remains a silent sentinel in the vast wilderness. Its tragic history now a poignant chapter in the story of the Mojave. The whispers in the wind serve as a lasting tribute to the lost souls we helped to set free, their stories etched into the very heart of the desert. Whenever I drive through the Alaskan roads, the memory of that night resurfaces, a ghostly figure in white, a message written in frost, and the haunting whispers of the past. It serves as a constant reminder that some places carry the weight of history so profoundly that the past refuses to stay buried. By facing the darkness with empathy and respect, we can bridge the gap between our world and the spirits that linger in the shadows, bringing peace to those who have been lost and healing to ourselves. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the pines and the snow blankets the road in a serene silence, I catch a glimpse of a faint light or hear the distant echo of a sorrowful plea, a silent testament to the bonds that connect us all and the enduring hope for redemption and peace, even in the most desolate places. Story number 7. Whispers at the Mojave gas station. I've always found solace in the open road, the endless expanse of asphalt stretching out before me like a ribbon through the vast Mojave desert. There's something almost meditative about driving alone under the blanket of night, the hum of the engine and the whisper of the wind creating a rhythm that lulls me into a state of introspection. But on that fateful night in January, my journey took a turn from peaceful solitude to a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. It was a bitterly cold evening, the kind where the temperature plummets so low that breath turns to ice in the air. I had been on the road for hours, hauling supplies to a remote outpost that barely saw traffic except during the harshest of winters. My rig was reliable, my GPS updated, and my supplies well-stocked. Still, the Mojave has a way of humbling even the most seasoned drivers with its unforgiving terrain and unpredictable weather. As I navigated the winding highways, a sudden snowstorm began to rage, reducing visibility to mere feet. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, and snowflakes pelted my windshield with relentless fury. I knew I couldn't continue much longer. The storm was too intense, and the roads were becoming treacherous. With a heavy heart, I decided to pull over at the first sign of shelter, a small, deserted gas station I remembered passing earlier in the day. The sign above the pump flickered weakly, its neon lights struggling against the tempestuous weather. I maneuvered my truck into the bay, the tires crunching over the deepening snow. The station was eerily silent, the usual hum of pumps and the occasional car absent in the midst of the storm. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the biting cold, the snow swirling around me like a living entity. The building looked abandoned, windows boarded up years ago, yet the warm glow emanating from the inside suggested that someone, or something, was still there. Shivering, I made my way to the entrance, the door creaking ominously as I pushed it open. The interior was dimly lit, the remnants of an old coffee maker and scattered papers hinting at a forgotten presence. I quickly poured myself a cup of coffee from the self-service machine, grateful for the brief respite from the storm's wrath. As I sipped the hot liquid, trying to warm my frozen fingers, a sudden urge to use the restroom overcame me. The restroom was located at the far end of the station, a narrow corridor lined with old magazines and dusty countertops. I left my coffee on the counter and made my way down the hallway, the snowstorm's fury muffled behind the thick walls of the building. Inside the restroom, the air was frigid, the heater long since broken. I locked the door behind me, the metal clicking shut with a finality that sent a chill down my spine. Leaning against the sink, I glanced into the mirror, only to see my breath fogging up the glass in rapid succession. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the howling wind outside. "Don't stop again." The voice seemed to sigh, a sorrowful undertone that made my blood run cold. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, eyes darting around the empty room. There was no one there. The only movement was the flickering light bulb overhead, casting long, wavering shadows on the tiled floor. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and stepped closer to the mirror, half expecting to see a reflection that wasn't my own. But all I saw was my own terrified expression staring back at me, shaking off the unease. I finished my business and hurried back to the counter, eager to leave the unsettling restroom behind. As I approached my truck, a surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. The storm had intensified, the snow piling higher against the windows, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. That's when I noticed it. A message scrawled in the frost on my windshield, "Don't stop again." I stared at the words, my mind racing to make sense of the impossible. The gas station had been abandoned for years, yet here was a message unmistakably written by human hands. Panic set in as I wondered who could have written it, or if it was something far more sinister. Determined to get back on the road, I started the engine, but the cold seemed to seep into every part of my truck, making it sluggish and unresponsive. Frustration and fear gnawed at me as I realized that leaving might not be as simple as I thought. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the desolate landscape around me felt like a maze with no exit. That night, as I struggled to get my rig moving, the whispers returned, louder and more urgent. "Don't stop again," they repeated, echoing through the empty gas station like the mournful wails of lost souls. I glanced back at the building, half expecting to see the ghostly figure of a woman in a red coat staring back at me. But it was as empty as before. Desperate, I reached out to my dispatcher, hoping for guidance or help. But the storm had severed all communications. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare of my own making, or so I thought. Hours passed in a blur of fear and frustration. The storm raged on, and my truck remained stubbornly stuck. The message on the windshield, a constant reminder of the haunting presence that seemed to linger in the desolate Mojave. Sleep was elusive, my mind haunted by the ghostly whispers and the eerie silence that enveloped the gas station. Just as hope began to fade, a faint glimmer of light appeared through the swirling snow, a distant search party making their way towards the gas station. Relief surged through me as I watched the rescuers navigate the treacherous roads, their headlights cutting through the blinding storm. But as they approached, something felt off. Their movements were hesitant, their expressions wary, as if they too sensed the malevolent presence that haunted the area. One of the rescuers, a grizzled man named Hank, reached my truck and helped me climb out, his grip steady despite the chaos around us. "You okay, son?" he asked, his voice gravelly with concern. I nodded, unable to find the words to describe the terror that had consumed me. As we prepared to leave, Hank glanced back at the abandoned gas station, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "This place gives me the creeps," he muttered, the weight of unspoken fears hanging heavy in the air. We trudged through the storm, the rescuers' shouts lost in the howling wind. As we distanced ourselves from the gas station, I glanced back one last time, the building now a mere shadow against the blinding snow. The message on my windshield remained, a chilling reminder of the night I faced the supernatural forces that lurked in the heart of the Mojave. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of that night, the whispering voices, the ghostly presence, and the ominous message haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the history of the Mojave gas station, piecing together the tragic stories of those who had perished in the unforgiving desert. I learned that decades ago, a young couple had vanished without a trace during a similar storm, their disappearance shrouded in mystery. Rumors swirled about restless spirits and cursed grounds, tales that had been dismissed as mere folklore until now. The more I dug, the more I realized that the gas station was a focal point for the lingering souls of those who had been lost to the desert's merciless embrace. Determined to lay the spirits to rest, I returned to the gas station one last time, armed with candles, photographs, and a deep sense of empathy for the lost souls that haunted the desolate landscape. As I lit the candles and placed the photographs around the building, the air grew colder, the wind whispering words of sorrow and longing. "May you find peace," I whispered, my voice steady despite the fear that still lingered in the air. The storm began to calm, the snow gradually ceasing its relentless assault. The whispers softened, their sorrowful cries blending into a harmonious silence that spoke of release and acceptance. The message on my windshield faded, replaced by a serene stillness that enveloped the gas station. As I walked away, the haunting presence lifted, the spirits finally finding the peace they had long been denied. The Mojave Desert, once a place of despair and loss, now stood as a testament to the enduring power of compassion and the belief that even in the harshest of environments, there is always hope for redemption and peace. Years have passed since that transformative night in the Mojave, and the memory of the haunted gas station remains a haunting reminder of the thin line between the living and the dead. The whispers in the wind serve as a silent tribute to the lost souls we helped to set free, their stories etched into the very heart of the desert. Whenever I drive through the Mojave, the vast expanse of snow-covered landscape stretching out before me, I carry with me the lessons learned from that night. The road, once a symbol of freedom and solitude, now holds a deeper meaning, a connection to the past and a reminder of the spirits that linger in the shadows, waiting to be remembered and honored. Living my life on the road, I've come to understand that some places carry the weight of history so profoundly that the past refuses to stay buried. By facing the darkness with empathy and understanding, we can bridge the gap between our world and the spirits that haunt the shadows, bringing peace to those who have been lost and healing to ourselves. And sometimes, when the storm clouds gather and the wind begins to howl through the Mojave, I find myself glancing towards the horizon, hoping to catch a glimpse of a faint red coat or hear the distant echo of a whispered plea, a silent testament to the souls we helped to set free and the enduring bonds that connect us all, transcending even the most relentless storms.